Hey, I'm Dan.
And I'm Justin.
And this is End of All Roads, Leg 5.
I'm Dan Bartlett. I'm a commercial airline pilot. And good luck getting me away from my motorcycle. I think it's important to share adventures similar to mine as a means to inspire people to follow their dreams and lead larger lives. This trip has already got a life of its own and inspired a few friends that are going to be joining me along the way. Come along, join the adventure too.
Leg 5 had a weird tone with it because we were still hanging on to Leg 4, everything that happened in Leg 4, and the simple truth of it, we weren't ready to get back on the road. We felt like we had to get back on the road in order to kind of maintain some momentum with the ride, because we all felt like we had to carry on. We had to carry the torch. We had to keep going. We were going to take our friend Brian's remains with us, and we had a new mission on our trip, which was spreading his ashes around the world. And now there was a duty associated with our trip that was supposed to be a fun trip, and now all of these things kind of culminated together along with the pain of missing our friend. And so as we made the commitment to go, I ended up with our schedule, because we ride for a month and then we go back to work for a month. So we do a month on, a month off. This whole journey, that's our rhythm, that's our pace, a month on, month off. Well, my first thought was I want to go see the scene of the accident of where Brian's accident was. It was 130 miles north of Zacatecas. I didn't know what to bring, but I figured I'd bring a cross. All of us, our faiths are kind of all over the board, but I decided to bring a cross. And there was a scenic beauty to the place. When you look at the lay of the land, there's a beauty to it, but there's an incredibly awful tone with that place. And while I was on the drive with Roy to that scene, he explained to me that there are these trees called the Las Palmas trees, which means the palm trees. But there's many different forms of palm trees. There was already an eerie vibe. Now there's even more of an eerie vibe. And I learned to hate these trees. And every time I looked at these trees, even as I talk about it, I get sick to my stomach even thinking about it, much less talking about it. And so here I am standing in this sea of Las Palmas trees and looking at the site, and I climbed up on this rock ridge and I put the cross in the ground, and I sat for about 2 hours, and I had 2 hours for me to talk to my friend. This was the therapeutic part. I felt like there were some things unsaid that I needed to say, and I took some time for me, and that's the way that went. And it was a powerful couple hours. And then so we got back in Roy's rust bucket of a taxi, and we went 130 miles back, and then I waited for 2 days for Justin and Bob to show up. I was so relieved when those guys showed up, because for 2 days I'd been sitting there in this fresh memory of the loss of my friend and all the bundle of emotions that town, Zacatecas, embodied. I'd been sitting there by myself. It was not a good 2 days. The weather was beautiful, the town was beautiful, and it was awful. It was an awful 2 days. There's a therapy to being on the bikes that only motorcycles can do, and that's why most motorcycle lovers are motorcycle enthusiasts, because there is a true clearing your head and a therapy to it. It felt great to be on the road again and kind of just have the wind in our hair, and the weather was beautiful. But it was weird being on the bikes again, just because we had just seen something that was terrible. We're all probably a little bit afraid in some form or another, just because when you see that kind of thing, it sticks with you. And we got on the road, and Bob was moving at a snail's pace. Bob is like, I'm not going over the speed limit. Well, the speed limit's like 50.
I expressed both to Dan and Justin that I didn't want to go faster than 50. I had some serious guidelines that were in my head as to what I was going to do, and almost to the point where it was like, if you guys are going to take off, great, I'll just hang back and I'll eventually meet up with you as long as I got a GPS coordinate. I'm just going to do my thing at my speed, at my pace, and be comfortable with getting back on the motorcycle that I had so much anxiety with getting back on.
I sort of had this fresh hope that things were going to get better from there. We definitely had the yips. You know, we're riding out of town. Everybody had a little bit of a tight grip on the handlebars. We're talking a lot. We usually talk a lot, but now we're really, look at that dog, look at that car, look at that bike. We're really aware of everything that's going on. And yeah, it was very slow going, getting out of Zacatecas, and riding, the next stop was San Miguel de Allende, and it was a long ride. It was a long ride out there.
We were walking around town in San Miguel de Allende, and we met this doctor whose name happened to be Phil, so we remembered his name easily, Dr. Phil. And he was walking by our bikes one day, and he said, "Hey man, where are you guys coming to?" We got the whole conversation started. Well, he was living in Costa Rica, and he had ridden his motorcycle from Costa Rica up to San Miguel de Allende, so he was doing the opposite direction ride. And so we went out for drinks and dinner that night, and he gave us the whole A to Z, towns to stay in, do's and don'ts, and we quickly became friends, and we instantly got a big appreciation for Dr. Phil. And so as we got all the information from him the next morning, we said goodbye to Dr. Phil and Dana and Twyla, started up the engines. Bob started his, Justin started his, I go to start mine, nothing. So my BMW F800 GSA is dead now too. So we now have a problem. So very long story short, found a local shop. This guy is like tinkering on moped kind of guy, and he fixed it in a matter of a day. So then we finally ventured out of San Miguel de Allende. We finally left.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about San Miguel de Allende is that when somebody new rolls into town, everybody knows. So we'd been there maybe 12 hours, and we walk into this bar and they're like, "Oh, you're the guys riding around the world on motorcycles." I mean, everybody in the town knew who we were, basically, and in such a short period of time, it was unbelievable.
It was a really awesome town. That town was really cool. You can't go near the city unless you have a Mexico City road permit. We didn't have that permit, so we could not miss our turn. We had to stay on the loop that went around the town. And so as we were approaching Mexico City, we were late. We were talking, because a lot of times we get real gabby in our intercoms, and we just forget, oh my gosh, there's a turn coming up. I ended up going straight, and Bob was far enough behind who had a choice. Do I follow Dan or do I follow Justin? Well, Justin's got, the awareness that we need to be going this way.
So right after I got off the highway at the off-ramp there, I stopped on the side, and I saw Bob was there, and we were trying to regroup. It's like, okay, what do we do? Okay, we all have the same GPS coordinates for the hotel. Let's just press on, and hopefully we'll meet up again. So
as they peeled off and went down an exit ramp, and now I'm in bumper-to-bumper traffic, I mean, typically I ride by myself all the time. I'm not reluctant to ride by myself, but we're approaching Mexico City, and there's a lot of unknown factors in Mexico City. And so my GPS, I looked for, a way to catch up with them, and I took an exit ramp, and boom, I'm in this not so great neighborhood. And now I start getting pissed, because god dang it, here I am in this ghetto of a neighborhood, and I'm in this BMW motorcycle, I got all this gear, and I'm by myself, and I'm vulnerable. And now I'm tired, and things are starting to boil to a head for a number of different reasons. And as I start to kind of feel this anxiety and anger starts to come up, I said to myself, I initially started this trip with the intention of being by myself. So why am I getting upset that I happen to find myself in a not the best predicament? Just work it out. And that's exactly what I did. And so I did a U-turn. I got back up on the highway. I'm trying to find my way. My GPS is starting to do a couple weird things, because, as Justin just said, the BMW, the Motorrad GPS database is meaningless when you leave Texas, basically. When you get out of North America into Mexico, it's terrible. So Pueblo was a very short stop for us. We only stayed there for a day, one night. And then after checking out the different mole sauces, the festival, roaming around the main center of town, we hit the road the next day to Oaxaca. We ended up going to a restaurant. We wanted to seek out a restaurant. I love Mexican food. Justin loves Mexican food. Mexican food is one of those meals that we can eat every meal of the day, actually. And we live on the Pacific. We live on the Pacific island of Guam, and we have 3 Mexican restaurants on the island, and they're not the best. So I have a requirement now, which sounds silly, but to have Mexican food, it has to be prepared by a Mexican.
And I can't wait to just hang out in Europe and spend like a year.
It was very loud in the restaurant, and we got our spot. I put a camera across from us and set up a time-lapse footage, and it was brought up of the wrong turn and a thing that I had said, a thing that Bob had said, a thing that Justin had said, and it slowly escalated, I should say quickly escalated, into an argument. Everything was boiling to a head from the loss of our friend Brian. We were all still really, really hurting. And we caused a huge scene in this restaurant that thankfully the restaurant was as loud as we were. So the scene wasn't as ugly as maybe it could have been, but it was still ugly. It felt ugly.
The argument at the table, I feel, was definitely bound to happen.
Once we became aware of what other people must think is going on, I felt a little embarrassed about how bad things must have seemed. And
it's silly, but at the same time, you know, I'm kind of glad that it happened. And when it did, and I think the big thing we took from all of that was it was way too early for us to be back on the bikes. We should have probably had more time to sit down together to talk about these possibilities, and we didn't. And it just came to a head and completely erupted like a volcano.
And so we stopped, and that's when we talked more, and I think we got through some more things after that, and then we just kind of agreed to kind of go home and cool off and talk about it the next day.
The next morning, as we all had time to kind of reflect on the words that were said, we had our last little powwow, and as that relief amongst ourselves happened, we chose a historical spot to go and spread some of Brian's ashes, because Brian is still with us on this ride. Literally, we're taking his remains with us.
My best friends that I'm riding around the world with, to get in an argument looks silly now. It looks like absolutely stupid. But in a way, I totally feel it brought us all closer together.
And that's when we started thinking about Brian again. And that's when our missing friend really came back to the forefront of the ride and why we were there. And yeah, it was a very powerful moment on the pyramid, and we sprinkled his ashes, and it was a very bonding and very healing experience for all of us.
There was a therapy in that, and it was the first time that we had pulled our friend out, and all of us had a chance to look at him and to touch him and to feel him and to spread his ashes on this trip. We're going to do this many times along the way. We've now already done it several times. That was the first. So we left Oaxaca, we left Mount Alban, and then after Mount Alban, we were headed towards the border of Guatemala. So we picked a town, which I'm not going to pronounce correctly. I think it's Aji-Ijipan, which we call Paji-Aji-Aji-Aji-Ajipan. Just because there's so many I's and J's in that name, I don't know who in the world is doing their spelling down there, but it's a long name, but we found Paji-Ijipan, which is always fun to say. And then when we got there, we found a cool little Airbnb on the beach, and then did the border crossing the next day into Guatemala.
It felt good, you know, because Mexico left such a stain for us. It felt like we were completing something really important by finally getting to the final destination in Mexico. We were wrestling with rushing through it or, you know, taking our time, and we kind of did a little bit of both, but I think we all felt this tremendous sense of, oh, we're finally almost out of Mexico. You know, tomorrow we'll be in Guatemala, and everything's going to be different.
I hung out at the pool, which I was almost by myself. There was a pool bar and a pool, and I was there, and these guys wanted to take a little ferry across. It was like half a mile, right?
It was like 30 yards. It was really just short. Barely across the water.
Yeah, even after that footage, I'm glad I didn't go. That's a great point about the accomplishment of leaving Mexico. That was really worth noting, because you're absolutely right. That when we realize that we're leaving Mexico, we're leaving a lot behind. A lot of baggage and a lot of emotions, and just, we were ready to... Mexico itself was surprisingly great. The people were better than I think any of us would have ever guessed. The villages were great. The roads were great. We hit the weather in a slot that was very kind to us.
The people in Mexico were so compassionate, and I think it was Dan that pointed out that we never even met one person that was so much as even rude to us the entire time we were there. And everybody was friendly, outgoing, willing to help. They were there for us. I mean, when Brian had his accident, people came out of nowhere, and they stayed with us all day through the night. It's amazing.
People were great. And everyone's like, they're going to eat your liver. I'm like, I don't think you want my liver.
Don't forget to tune in to the next episode of End of All Roads to follow the boys as they continue their ride around the world. See what new and fun places await them and what challenges they're going to have to overcome. All in the next episode of End of All Roads.